mentioned, momentum. We move. Time to continue the show here. So I have the phenomenal pleasure of introducing our next keynote. His name is Alexander Cummings. And Alexander Cummings is the founder and chairman of Cummings Investments Holdings Limited. In addition to this, he's the chairman as a philanthropist of the Cummings Africa Foundation. And in terms of his previous experiences, he also served as the former executive vice president and chief of administrative officer work for Coca-Cola Company. We're really excited to have him here as our keynote address to close out our panel. And from that, we're going to progress into some moderation with Professor Akinola, and then have, because we need some galavante, some fun, right? We have a fashion show after that as well. So we look forward to hear from Alexander Cummings and progress from there. So thank you again.
Thank you. I acknowledge GT for the invitation. I also got to meet Lydia and Yvette, who I think, Danielle, excuse me, who are also co-chairs of this event. So thanks for the opportunity to have this conversation. I also noticed that I participated in, or attended 2 other panels, and everybody had their iPhones with their notes, and I handwritten my notes, so I think I'm showing my age. The question is, how can we seize the moment? How can we take advantage of this interest in Africa? Let me first of all say that we've been through this period before where people thought, this is Africa's time. We've had ups and downs and peaks and valleys as far as how we seize these opportunities. But I think perhaps one of the reasons why we've not taken full advantage, and one of the things we need to do to take full advantage is we have to recognize the opportunities when they come. Right? We have to seize it. We have to know this is the time. And that means African leaders need to understand and get it. It means the diaspora, because African diaspora, you have the benefit of seeing the continent from afar. You can watch, observe, you can see the trends. When you're living in the experiences, you don't always necessarily see the opportunities that come your way, or you don't feel and experience the change because it's incremental, it's your daily life. And so you have a unique role to make us aware that these trends are there, these opportunities are there, and how can we, who live and breathe Africa, who live on the continent, how can we take advantage of it? So that recognition is important, is the beginning. The other thing that's important in this effort, though, is to recognize that there are no silver bullets. There's not just one simple thing we can do, only 1 or 2 actions we can take. We have to attack this issue or take advantage of this issue on multiple fronts. And anybody who believes that we can wave a magic wand and somehow, Africa will take advantage of these opportunities and be transformed, you will be disappointed. This will require hard work and sacrifice. Talking about it, wishing it to happen, will not have it materialize. We have to do the work to make the sacrifice. And it leads me to another point, and something I want to quote President Kagame when he says Africans have to own the problems and own the solutions. So we have to not be Pollyannish, not be naive about the challenges, recognize the opportunities, but then we gotta own the solutions, we gotta own the problems. It has to be us. Yes, we can engage others, we can get help, but that recognition that only us can change Africa is critical to anything material happening. And so very important point that we own it, we recognize it, and we take advantage of it, and then we're prepared to do the work and make the sacrifice and make it happen. It will not happen by remote control. It will not happen again because we somehow, wish it to happen. We're going to have to get in the trenches to make the sacrifices and do the work. The other thing we have to recognize is that Africa is not homogeneous. Yes, we have a lot of things in common across the continent, but the opportunities as they exist will vary by country. So if you take my country, for example, Liberia, relatively small, 5 million people. I think the population of Greater Accra is 5 million, right? And that's the entire Liberia. But we have a lot of natural resources. So again, it's about understanding our comparative advantage and our comparative disadvantage. We lack scale because 5 million is relatively small. But on the other side, we got iron ore, we got gold, we got diamonds, rich country, poor but rich in resources. But that understanding that the continent is not homogeneous, understanding comparative advantage, strengths and weaknesses, and then leveraging that. The other important part of Africa moving ahead is making sure the regional blocks work, and then ultimately we create one common market. Easier said than done, will take a long time to do, but if you think about China, India, right, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4 billion people. The United States is almost 350 million people, right? Scale matters. And as we think about Africa moving forward, let's start with the regional blocks, ECOWAS, SADC, so on and so forth. But ultimately, the Africa-Free Continental Trade Zone, I think, is critical to us taking advantage of the interest in the continent and encouraging trade within Africa. It's amazing that you can get more flights, and it's easier to fly from Monrovia, Accra, or Lagos, or Johannesburg to Paris, or London, or to New York. But trying to get from Monrovia to Kinshasa, almost impossible, right? Because we don't trade within the continent. Goods and services move north-south and don't stay within Africa. So taking advantage of the size, these trade groups. What's nice about ECOWAS today, with my Liberian passport, I can go to any ECOWAS country, I don't get a visa, I can start to do business without too much regulation, and we should take advantage of that. The other opportunity we have, and we have to take advantage of, is we have to focus on the private sector. Today, in most African countries, the government is almost everything. The government actually crowds out the private sector. And so is the wrong construct. We have to encourage private sector growth. We have to make it easy for Africans and anybody to do business in Africa, so that the private sector becomes the engine for growth on the continent, and the government becomes small and more efficient and creates the environment for private sector to grow and thrive. Even as we build infrastructure, as we build what we call the common good, roads, electricity, we should use the private sector to actually make that happen. And the African private sector, we should be unapologetic about wanting Africans to be the investors, to be the owners. Yes, we should not close the doors to others because, they have the capital. We need to leverage that. We need to engage them. But we Africans have to own that. Some of the hows, so I've talked about a lot of the what's, is this concept of what I call winning hearts and minds. And winning hearts and minds of the youth. Africa is a young, I think the median age in Africa, I think is 19 years, right? Africa is normally referred to as the youngest billion, right? Small, relatively small, but lots of potential and a very young continent. So how can we deliberately engage hearts and minds? And the ways you do that is arts, culture, music, sports, religion. And so African governments, I believe, need to invest more in those things that are considered soft. But they can influence how people think about themselves. They can help people think differently about integrity, and ethics, and values. So being deliberate about how you use sports, how you use music, how you use arts, how you use culture, even religion. Very important, I think, to how we can move the continent forward, take advantage of the opportunities we have. The other thing we need to do and focus on is we have to actively engage the diaspora. And I think African governments have to be deliberate about that. Because there's a lot of knowledge, there's a lot of experience in the diaspora, but the diaspora also has to want to get involved. Not try to do it by remote control. Get engaged. You know the concept you can do good and make money. They're not mutually exclusive, right? But the diaspora has to be engaged, and we on the continent have to be prepared to embrace the diaspora. The use of technology can make a big difference in how we change Africa. In almost every area, right? Technology can help us transform and change. In many countries in Africa, you're not fighting, a lot of good legacy systems or processes. Yes, there are systems and processes there. They're typically not the best. And how you use technology, whether it's in education, healthcare, or agriculture, whatever, technology can play a significant role in how we change the country. But the most important thing, I believe, is for us to recognize the opportunity and then to engage and win hearts and minds, especially the hearts and minds of our young people. Our young people in Africa today are both the biggest opportunity we have and the biggest threat we have. If we don't engage them, if we don't train them, if we don't develop them, if we don't create jobs for them, it's a potential time bomb. If we do those things, they become a massive market, massive opportunity, and can truly help us transform the country. So let me stop there in terms of opening remarks. We'll invite Professor to come and ask me some tough questions, and then we'll open it up to everybody else for any question on any topic that you may have.
And who is in front of you right here. So yes, Wilson gave an introduction, but there is more. There is much, much more. So you mentioned, yes, founder and chairman of Cummings Investments Holdings, founder of the Cummings Africa Foundation, which means that he supported specifically invested nearly $2 million into health, education, entrepreneurship, the arts, and women and youth empowerment in Liberia. Can you get a hand clap for that? And I kind of wanted to think about, or have everyone think about, where they are now and where you were when you were at their stage. Yes, he got his MBA from Clark Atlanta University. What was on your mind back then when you were getting your MBA, thinking about your journey ahead?
So, to be honest, I was just thinking about getting a job. I got married in graduate school, and was just thinking about family and getting a job and supporting myself, etc. But what I tell people in terms of what I attribute to who I am today, is first the acknowledgement that some of it is providence, right? It's, some people call it luck, I call it blessings. And just acknowledging that part of your ultimate success is there's going to be things that just happen, right? So acknowledging that I think is important. But then beyond that, and none of this will be a rocket science, but I promise you, if you follow these things, your chances of being successful are very high. The next one is hard work and discipline, right? It's easy to want a path of least resistance. It's kind of human nature. But that's not always the best path. So hard work, discipline, focus, and then the willingness to always want to learn, to never believe you know it all. Even at my age and stage in life, always asking questions, always want to learn. One of my biggest strengths is I'm also very comfortable with myself. I know what I know, I know what I don't know. And if you are smarter than me, please come help. Let's do it together, right? Because I remind people as you become a leader, people don't remember the team members, by the way. No offense to team members. People remember the leader. So if you are leading an organization or section or whatever, and that group has success, people remember you were the person who had the success. If that group fails, you're the one, right? So get the best people around you. Build teams. And oftentimes, very smart, bright people, they want to be acknowledged. You know, let them get the credit in the moment. In the long term, nobody remember them. Not literally, but so those are some of the things that explain, I think, why we are where we are today.
So I appreciate you, especially because I teach the core required lead course here. And yes, you just reiterated many of the important points that many of you might have forgotten to date. So thank you for emphasizing those. And you mentioned this idea of luck, providence, and blessings. One of my favorite phrases is luck, blessings, favors the prepared. So you were also prepared. And also in your remarks you said, you need to be able to recognize opportunities when they come. So what opportunities were you prepared to follow through on when they came your way to lead to where you are now?
So to reinforce that point is, there's a saying that I like is the harder you work, the luckier you get, right? And preparation is a major part of that. And I also remind young people that yes, you should have aspirations and you should want to look ahead, but you also need to focus on the opportunity of the job you have in front of you today. Because if you look too far ahead too often, you sometimes trip on obstacles that you could have seen and avoided, or sometimes you miss the opportunity because you're looking, you know, what I want to be 10 years, 15 years, I want to be on this money, all this other thing. You're not focusing on the here and now. For me, you know, recognizing early on that if I wanted to get ahead, first I worked at a Pillsbury company and then a Coca-Cola company. I had to be willing to relocate, to move, because I started in Minneapolis with the Pillsbury company, and most of the folks said they don't want to leave Minneapolis. Well, it wasn't home to us, it was very cold. And so I recognized, you know, if I agreed, because it was a big multinational corporation, if I agreed and willing to move around, and I had a wonderful wife who agreed to move around, I would get ahead. Then the others would just want to stay in Minneapolis, and it's a choice. But it's a simple understanding or recognizing what would make the difference to accelerate. And so at 36, I became the youngest officer at a Pillsbury company. Right? But I moved to Pennsylvania, a little town called Allentown, right near out on the country. I call it a wild spread in the road. We were like 2 or 3 black families in this whole little town, right? And then we moved to New Jersey, then back to Minneapolis and so on and so forth. Recognize that, you know what, if I'm willing to move around, I can get ahead of folks who've been here a long time. Same like Coca-Cola. When I joined Coca-Cola, I was Vice President of Finance for Pillsbury International. And the recruiter came to join Coca-Cola, and they wanted to go to Nigeria. And a lot of folks said, I'm going from Minneapolis to Nigeria, I'm African, I'm an expat in Lagos, why not? Okay. And so we went, packed up the family, I'll introduce my son here, packed up the family, and moved to Lagos. Best decision I ever made. Best decision I ever made. And by the way, my maternal grandfather was Nigerian. So my mother is Iowa, Delhi, my daughter's Iowa. But that was how I moved. But so we moved to Nigeria, and then I went to Nairobi, and London, and Johannesburg, and then back to the States. So it's that willingness to move and be flexible and still a lot of opportunities.
And you mentioned being one of the few black families in the towns you were in, but you were also one of the few black senior people in the companies you were in too.
Correct.
Tell us more about what that experience was like for you then, and what advice would you give many of us in here who find ourselves in that situation in the organizations we are a part of?
Yeah. So the first thing I remind us is that that there are just barriers and obstacles you can't dwell on. Yes, it's true you gotta work harder than anybody else. You gotta recognize, yes, sometimes you're in meetings and you may make the same suggestions somebody else makes, but you aren't heard or seen. My point is, these barriers are oftentimes real, but you can't dwell on it. You can't let that be the reason why you're not working. Just recognize it is what it is and determine what you're going to do to get ahead of it, right? Also remember that organizations are social by nature. So you have to engage, you have to socialize with your colleagues, with your peers. You have to make them comfortable. And that's true whether it's in all black organizations like that, or you're in Liberia in my case, or you're working with all the multicultural people gotta be comfortable as human nature. If I'm not comfortable, I don't like you, or hey, it doesn't work here, we're all social animals. So that recognition is important as you strive to move ahead. Always have alternatives. I used to always kind of try to test the market because that confidence that this doesn't work, I can do something else, I found very liberating in decisions I made, in maybe taking some risk or disagreeing with somebody because, if it didn't work, I'll do X, Y, Z, and I'll be fine. But that self-confidence is important, not arrogance, by the way. But self-confidence is very important in how you navigate, how you get from point A to point B. And I always remind people, never confuse activity with results, right? You can be very busy, running around and achieve nothing. For me, you have to be very clear on what are you trying to achieve, what is your goal, and how do these activities get you from point A to point B. But you can be running around, and I see people do that all the time. And they're very busy, lot of activity and no results. Focus on the end goal, focus on the results. Focus on what you can tangibly say, I accomplished X, Y, Z. And then, at some point, the environment you find yourself may not be conducive for you. Right? Have the courage to leave it. You may not be able to do it right away because you have family, but don't stay in an environment that is just not working, that you're not comfortable in, that don't appreciate you. At some point, you gotta decide, this isn't working, I'm gonna take the time and find another opportunity, and then you go where you find an opportunity that suits you. And perhaps lastly, whatever you do, you enjoy. So what I do today, I don't consider work. Politics for me is a bit of work, but the business side, because I enjoy what I did, and so it didn't feel like, and then you do it well.
So you then decided, though, to make the transition from traditional corporate America to start your own thing. Can you tell us about that moment for you that you felt like, this is time, this is the time, this is why I want to do this? Take us back to that place.
So at one point I was the number 2 executive at Coca-Cola globally. And at one point I decided I wanted to do something different. That the CEO at the time and I were close in age, so it was more likely I would replace him. He was, I think, 4 years, 5 years ago now. And I said, you know what, I've done enough corporate stuff, I've had a lot of success. I need to start thinking about doing something different. I wanted to spend more time giving back. I wanted to kind of get out of the rat race. And I decided, one, I wanted to enter politics, because I think that's how you can really make a difference in Africa, in the continent, in Liberia specifically. Very passionate about the continent, very passionate about the country. I've been blessed with all of these experiences, so how can I bring this to bear? But I wanted to make sure that we were managing the family wealth in the right way, and more proactively, and not sort of accident. I wanted to invest directly in African businesses and in African American businesses, unapologetically. So together with my son, wife, and daughter, we decided to form Cummings Investment Holdings. Boykai, who's here, runs it. He runs it a lot better than I did, seriously. And I don't get involved in it anyway. But it was a way, it was to transition to politics, to make sure the business was on, the investments were on a sound footing, continue to grow. And politics is not cheap, actually. And so we deliberately, about 3 or 4 years before I was going to retire, because I knew when I was going to retire, we started the transition, kind of set up systems, processes, all the legal work to do that, with the ultimate goal that I was going to politics. So it was planned for, thoughtful, and deliberate.
Now, as you think about the investments that you've made in Africa, can you tell us about which ones you're the most proud of?
So we've made some investments in Liberia, 2 significant ones. One is doing very well, we're struggling. I don't disclose the particular companies because I'm in politics. If people know, the government in power knows, they will get punished, they will go after them, unfortunately, right? But one of these businesses is a young Liberian entrepreneur who has just done extremely well. He actually he was part of African Leadership Academy with Johannesburg, because he came to TUS and decided to go back home and started this business. He actually wrote the software that he runs his company on. Amazing, right? But it's doing relatively well. So something we're very proud of. We made some investments in Ghana that are also doing well. And then here in the United States, we've invested in some African American businesses that are also doing very well. So very proud of those, and then we have a traditional portfolio, the stocks, the market, and all that. So there's a combination of all of that. That's doing well.
So you gave some pieces of advice in terms of how to think about what people want to and could invest in the continent. I want you to share a little bit more about Liberia specifically, because we hear a lot about many of the other countries. What do you think we can take away from or learn from Liberia that people don't know enough about?
So, Liberia has a very interesting history. Liberia was settled in the 1800s by free slaves from the United States. And Liberia is the oldest republic in Africa, 175 years, never been colonized. So our Ethiopian friends and I will argue about, who's older, who hasn't been colonized. Lots of natural resources, as I mentioned, iron ore, gold, diamonds. Something I often wonder, like diamonds in South Africa, like diamonds in Liberia, like in Angola, Sierra Leone, yet all the diamond centers are not in Africa. If you think about it, right? Is in Mumbai, I believe, in Tel Aviv, in Antwerp. And nothing against that, but we need to have I think it's a little bit in transparent. But that was an aside. Liberia has all of these natural resources. In Liberia, we over-index. And by the way, I'm biased, so forgive me, right? I'm a Liberian, so I will be biased. But we over-index in terms of our relative size and what we accomplished outside of Liberia. But in terms of opportunities in our country, infrastructure is a challenge. So whether it's electricity, water, technology, agriculture, a big opportunity, tourism, right? Ecotourism specifically, major opportunity in our country. So lots of opportunities. Unfortunately, governance today in Liberia is not great. That's what we're trying to change. So the environment is not necessarily the best, but still many opportunities. If you want to come talk to me and we can get more specific about what those opportunities may be.
Business and politics in the region. You're trying to make a mark by changing that. I mean, everyone here, when I said business and politics, they look like, oh, it's very problematic. Tell us a little bit more about what changes you think you need, what changes need to be seen in the way those two mix, and what can we all do? I mean, here in the States, there is this great movement where we are trying to have more of an impact. We saw that with Obama's election. What else can be done in terms of people here to change some of the dynamics, business, politics, what more can be done?
So, first of all, I think we on the continent in Africa need to recognize the importance of, as I mentioned in my remarks, the private sector, the importance of entrepreneurship, and we have to create an environment that fosters, that encourages entrepreneurship, private sector, etc. I think people here have to be willing to move to the continent to help push these changes. I know it will be a sacrifice because typically in most of our countries the infrastructure isn't there, and those are some of the trade-offs you'll need to make. But moving back, bringing your expertise, and to the extent, if you want to stay here for a while and make some money, because capital is required, right? So do that, but have a clear plan in mind that I'll do it for 5 years, 10 years, whatever, make some money, get some critical mass of cash, but then physically move the continent. I think I can't encourage that enough. If for whatever reason you can't do that, and not everybody can or want to, then identify people you can partner with, or institutions, or companies. Do your homework, do your diligence, but then provide some sort of partnership, and it could be just funding, it could be advice, whatever, but identify some enterprise in your own country, or any country on the continent, that you can partner with and you can support from afar. But be deliberate, be intentional, take a long-term perspective. Again, these things will not happen overnight or quickly, but it can and will happen, and that persistence is something that I encourage you. But again, have a plan, have a focus, partner with somebody. If you can physically go home and do it yourself.
And to that end, what are 3 characteristics that you think anyone who's choosing to leave and live there needs to have a lot of?
You gotta be resilient and tenacious. There should be a big sign in Johannesburg, something to the effect that Africa is not for the faint of heart, right? You gotta be prepared to accept some disappointment, right? People who are into sales, they can have a no, because they get many more no's than yeses, but hopefully the few yeses kind of make up for the many no's. So that ability to handle disappointment is something I would encourage. And a bit of patience, it's a balance. You don't want to be too patient because we need to push, we need to be in a hurry in Africa because we're so far behind to change the continent. But recognizing that overnight success is unlikely, happens to a few people. So yeah, resilience, tenacious, some patience, prepared for some disappointments along the way, and take a long view. And you will ultimately be successful.
And what is your biggest hope for this next generation?
That they own the continent. They're not waiting for anybody else or for somebody else to do it for us. This generation has, I mentioned earlier in the support from President Gidami, we gotta own the problems, we gotta own the solutions. It's only us that can change Africa. There's a saying I like, if it is to be, it's up to me. If it is to be, it's up to me. We, this generation, particularly your generation, and your and I, we have to own the country. We have to own the solution. We have to own it. It has to be ours. We can't wait and depend on anybody else to do it, including waiting for somebody else in your own country to do it, right? You gotta engage. Otherwise, it will just be talk. And 10 years from now, it will be another moment. We'll be having this conversation. We gotta get involved. We gotta own it.
A couple more questions for you, fun questions. So, businessman, philanthropist, politician, you have to have something else that if you dropped all of that, this is what you would do. What is that thing? That kind of mystical thing that if you didn't have to, train a million years to be great at something or whatever, what is the dream that you wish your alter ego could have experienced or been?
That's a great question. I don't, all the things you just described is kind of overhead. But I will describe the other side of it that people don't realize and know, right? I like to dance. I'm a good dancer. I like music, so African music, a little bit R&B, jazz, so my taste is very eclectic, even a little bit of classical. I love watching movies, I love walking, it gives me time to reflect. I read a lot, prolific reader. I have 4 grandkids. I spoil them and send them back to their father and mother. So that's kind of the other side of me. I don't know what else. I don't know what else I'll do.
He'd be Davio is what he's saying. That's what he's doing.
Absolutely.
I always like to end with a little bit of a lightning round. So I'm going to ask you to choose between 2 things. Diet Coke or regular Coke?
Regular Coke. I do high octane. I do full cane sugar. I don't do caffeinated coffee. I go for everything. Just in moderation.
Early bird or night owl?
Night owl.
Arsenal or Chelsea?
Arsenal.
What about Manchester United?
I'm not a Man U fan. I prefer Manchester City to Man U.
Would you rather know what everyone's thinking or be able to fly?
Ooh. To be able to fly.
Singing or dancing? Because you said you like both.
Ooh, I can't sing. I like music, but I can't sing. But I like to dance.
Netflix or Hulu?
Netflix.
Ghanaian jollof or Nigerian?
Nigerian jollof. When Liberia participates, Liberia jollof everything.
What can we give our keynote speaker a round?
I'm doing my PhD at the University of Texas in Dallas, and I'm also running a company in the
Questions.
My question, you mentioned when you were talking that Liberia is very rich in different order, and we learn so much of that in school. But unfortunately, that only stays in school. how can we compete at the global stage and actually participate in the decision making when it comes to our own ores?
So we've got iron ore, Guinea has iron ore, our neighboring country, right? I think that we should actually work together to leverage our resources. But we in Liberia cannot have very different or onerous rules about how we extract the resources if the Guinean rules are different or easier, right? We also have to always think about how can we insist that there's some added value to our natural resources and not just export the raw resources. So we have to be insistent with whoever is going to come and work with us to use those resources and there's some value that occurs in country.